Good morning and welcome to the 8:40 session on illicit connections. I'm Nikki with the City of Vancouver. I'll be moderating illicit connections, illicit discharges, and identifying sources of stormwater pollution, part 2, field manual trainings and videos. And this morning, we'll be taking your questions in the Q&A box, so type those in during the session. Questions will be answered following the presentation. Our presenters today are James Packman with Aspect Consulting, Jeanne Dorn with King County Stormwater Services, and Rebecca Dugopolski with Herrera. And with that, I will turn it over to the group. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nikki. Welcome and good morning. We're here today to tell you about a recently finished project that updated the illicit connection and illicit discharge, or ICID for short, guidance manual for Washington State and even parts beyond Washington State. This presentation is part 2 because it's a follow-up to the part 1 presentation that this same group, Rebecca, James, and I, gave at the last Municon in 2019. Part 1 that we gave in 2019 covered the project plan and the steps that went into updating this guidance manual. Part 2, this presentation this morning, will cover the updates that were made to this guidance manual and also talk about the virtual training sessions that were held and the training videos that were created for the updated manual. And just a brief description of what is SAM. SAM, or Stormwater Action Monitoring, is a collaborative stormwater monitoring program in Western Washington funded by more than 90 Phase 1 and Phase 2 permittees, municipal stormwater permittees, and it's run by the Washington State Department of Ecology. SAM's studies measure effectiveness of stormwater management efforts and communicate that information for adaptive management of stormwater regionally. Next slide, please, James. So the manual focuses on field methodologies for identifying and tracing sources of illicit connections and illicit discharges to the MS4 storm sewer. The manual and the associated training resources support the field screening and source tracing requirements of the MS4 permit for illicit discharge detection and elimination programs, or IDDE for short. Other components of IDDE are not included in this ICID manual, especially enforcement. This manual focuses on identifying, tracking illicit connections and discharges. As a Stormwater Action Monitoring Program study, the ICID manual also supports Ecology's regionally adaptive stormwater management. And again, the terminology, just as a reminder, ICID means illicit connections, illicit discharges. It does not include the enforcement part. So now I would like to hand off this presentation to Rebecca to go into more detail about the really necessary updates that were made to this ICID manual. Rebecca?
Great, thanks, Jeanne. So this first slide just shows the stepped process that we took to update the manual in 2020. So looking at this, we started off with an online survey, a short 10-question SurveyMonkey survey. We heard back from 35 different jurisdictions, which included 5 Phase 1s and 30 Phase 2s. We then had 2 live feedback workshops back when we could do workshops in person, and that was back in 2019. We had 47 attendees representing 3 Phase 1s, 43 Phase 2s, and 1 consulting firm. The next step was updating the literature review. So we took a look at the sources that we looked at for the original manual and added some resources from Western Washington, 5 IDD manuals from Western Washington, 7 IDD manuals from non-Western Washington jurisdictions, 4 federal or national guidance documents, and then 4 academic research articles. And then the last step of the process was reviewing the 2014 IDD database And that was taking a look at a 2017 study by the City of Lakewood and Aspect, looking at all the IDD records that have been reported and taking a look at those as well. So that's kind of our stepped approach to updating the manual. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary of how things changed in the manual. So if you're familiar with the original manual, we streamlined things a little bit. So we have fewer field screening methodologies. So we went down to core 4 methodologies that we'll take a look at in a minute. And the number of other methodologies went up for field screening methodologies. In the indicators section, we still have the 7 primary field screening indicators that are still there. Those are still the same ones as the original manual. And the follow-up indicators, we added 1 and subtracted 1, so same number there, but we added some additional other indicators. And then source tracing methodologies, we also streamlined that a little bit and moved some extra ones to the appendices that weren't used quite as frequently, and then streamlined the other methodologies as well. So a couple of those moved to the field screening methodologies, which is why that other number went up while the source tracing methodologies went down. And just a note that this does not cover elimination of illicit connections or illicit discharges, as Jeanne mentioned, or enforcement or corrective actions. So that's why we're focusing on the ICID portion and not the E in IDDE. This is a summary of the field screening methodology section. So as I mentioned, we're streamlined to the 4 field screening methodologies here listed in primary. We've got catch basin manhole inspections, ditch inspections, outfall inspections, and video inspections as kind of our 4 key field screening methodologies. And under other here, you can see the new methodology here in orange is canine scent tracking, and the 3 underlined in green are 3 that were moved from the source tracing methodologies and are now in the field screening methodologies other section. And then we moved a couple to the Appendix E, so business inspections and stormwater BMP inspections. Those are 2 things you can use for field screening, but they're not used quite as frequently for field screening or kind of the top 4 methodologies. So we still included those in the manual. We just moved them out of the main text and they're in an appendix now. So you can still find that content, it's just in a different location. In the field screening section, we also added detail for wet or dry weather screening when these methodologies should be performed. We updated the pros and cons tables within most sections, and we streamlined some of the content and reduced some of the redundancy in that section. The indicator section is the next section in the manual, and here, as I mentioned, we still have our 7 primary field screening indicators here in the middle column. And then we expanded the bacteria indicator considerably, so that one's in blue here. And then we took out potassium, that's one that moved into Appendix F, other indicators. And then we added total petroleum hydrocarbons. So even though we took one out, we added one, so we have the same number of follow-up indicators as we did in the previous manual. Along with that, we added a threshold for a turbidity or transparency tube into the turbidity section. We added and updated the bacteria thresholds located in the bacteria section, and we expanded the pollutant sources tables for most indicators. So there's definitely some updated content throughout that section. And this is just a screenshot of the other indicators. As I mentioned, we added quite a few indicators here. Those are the ones listed in bold orange. So we added caffeine, chemical oxygen demand, fecal sterols, fluorescence, pharmaceuticals, oxygen stable isotypes, and salinity. And we also added potassium to this table, though as I noted, that content can be found in the appendix. So we didn't want to pull anything out that was in there in the previous manual. Just as we deprioritized it, it got moved into an appendix. But if that's an indicator you use, you can still find that information in the manual. And a lot of these newer indicators we added can be used in combination with each other. So there's some information there and how you would use these for field screening. The next section is the source tracing methodologies. So here we still have the same primary source tracing methodologies, and we had 2 that shifted into Appendix G. So optical brightener monitoring and sandbagging you can now find in Appendix G. And we also added some new content to the vehicle foot reconnaissance section. So there's some interview questions there for homeowners and businesses that we added. We expanded some content related to continuous monitoring and the other indicators. And we added one other methodology, which is pressure testing. Along with that, we also added complementary source tracing methodologies throughout all the sections. So there's some information on which source tracing methodologies work well together. Similar to the rest of the manual, we updated pros and cons. And as I mentioned, in the vehicle foot reconnaissance, we added those homeowner and business owner interview questions. Some of the overall edits, so along with those specific edits in those 3 main sections, we also updated the regulatory requirements in the upfront section of the manual. So we made sure that we updated the summary of the permit requirements. We updated the definitions to match the most recent permit. We also updated and expanded the flow charts. So those have been updated since the previous manual. So definitely take a look at that. And document navigation, there's now section names and headers and subsection numbers. In the appendices, Appendix A, we updated the equipment costs and lists and literature references and updated options to calculate percent screened. And then there's also some new information. There's a new field template in, I believe it's Appendix B, with the rest of the field templates. And then there's also a new section 7, which is an index of suspected sources of discharge. So it's an easy way to kind of navigate through the manual. If you already have a suspected source of discharge, that'll point you towards the correct section in the manual that you can then take a look at and find more information on. And this is just a quick screenshot of the flow chart. So as I mentioned, we streamlined some of the flow charts. So we went to from this 11 by 17 page that had kind of a separate track for pipe and ditch systems to just a streamlined 8.5 by 11 page. So this is much more streamlined and there's not that separation between pipe and ditch systems. So it should be a bit easier for you to walk through and navigate. So the old ones on the left and then the new ones on the right. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to James to walk us through our most recent set of trainings and what we covered there.
All right, thank you very much, Rebecca. So I'll be discussing the training workshops that we provided with the updated curriculum, as Rebecca mentioned, the updated manual, I should say. And the curriculum for the trainings was updated to align with the updated content of the updated manual. There were trainings also provided and curriculum created with the original publication of the manual in 2013. So one of the big challenges was to update the format of the trainings to work in a virtual setting rather than a live in-person setting, which we had planned for initially. But we were up to the task. And just to share some of the logistics and tools that we used for preparing for the virtual training. One was that we used an online registration tool, which just helped with the communications and keeping track of all the RSVPs. In addition, we had to increase the number of facilitators and their roles for the training sessions. We had 3 lead facilitators, 4 supporting facilitators, as well as we had roles designated for backup staff and also tech support in case there was any issues with people and their internet connection or Zoom usability. In addition, we had some practice sessions just to get used to the virtual format and the equipment demonstration stations in the live trainings. Those were at tables, all in the common training room. So obviously we had to revise that for the virtual format. And each facilitator sort of led a demonstration station themselves, and we used the Zoom breakout rooms for that. All right, for the training curriculum itself, I'll just go through briefly what the curriculum included. The first part was an introduction and warm-up. The introduction included the background on the ICID manual, as well as what the current requirements are in the municipal stormwater permit. And then we included a warm-up exercise for the participants to kind of get them thinking about what illicit connections are, what illicit discharges are. And I just wanted to go through a couple of examples of those today to give you a taste of what the training was like. And basically we would, we put up photos like this one with a very creative gutter modification that, took the runoff from the roof and routed it onto the other side of the fence. And the question is this an illicit discharge? The short answer is no, it's not an illicit discharge to reroute roof runoff in this way. It may be illegal or problematic for other reasons, but this is not considered an illicit discharge. Another example is a charity car wash. Would the runoff from a charity car wash be considered an illicit discharge? The short answer is no, as long as there are no suds or soap or chemicals, and ideally the car wash water is routed to the sanitary sewer. And then thirdly, another example here is flushing fire hydrants. Is that considered an illicit discharge? This is also a no but or yes but type of answer. It is not considered an illicit discharge if the water is treated for is dechlorinated, and also the pH is adjusted to a neutral stage. Okay, the next part of the training curriculum included an overview of the ICID manual, and that was in a lecture format with slides, and it covered the major sections of the manual, as Rebecca described, the field screening methodologies, the indicator tests, the source tracing methodologies, and also some of the key appendices. And then there was a team exercise that we updated. The team exercise was created for the original training following the original publication of the ICID manual, and so it was updated to work in the Zoom breakout group setting. And we had groups of up to about 7 people with 1 facilitator each. And the idea was to find the illicit connections or illicit discharges at the lowest cost under a theoretical scenario that was prepared in a game-like setting. So you had to work with your teammates, and I've got an example of the map that we prepared that is part of this team exercise. And as you can see here, it's kind of a residential urbanized watershed with a creek on the right side flowing from the bottom to the top, or south to north, and you see the outfall noted at the top. And the teams have their choice of any of these 6 actions that are noted in the inset box in the map, and there's an approximate cost associated with those actions. So they decide, you know, what do we do next? Do we visually inspect a manhole? Do we dye test a building? And then they keep track of their costs. And as I said, the winner, quote, winner, is the one, or is the team who finds the most illicit connections and illicit discharges for the least cost. All right, so I wanted to give you an example question here that we give to the participants in the team exercise, and it's basically a clue to get them started, and then they need to decide what actions they might take. So the clue is as follows, and you can think about what you might do in your professional setting if you needed to trace some illicit connections or potential illicit discharges. And the clues are as follow. You receive a report of milky white discharge with suds flowing into the creek from the outfall. An initial investigation at the outfall also revealed the type of fungus present at the outfall, a gray filamentous sewage fungus. And a water sample that was collected at the outfall showed a very high concentration of fecal coliform bacteria. It's 6,000 CFUs per 100 milliliters. So the question is, what actions would you take to try to trace down whatever illicit connections, illicit discharges might be present here? So I hope that gives you a taste of what the team exercise is like in the training. The next part of the training curriculum included field equipment demonstration, and of course, when we did when we do live in-person trainings, this is live demonstrations, as I mentioned, at tables, usually in a common space where participants can rotate around the room and get a little hands-on experience with the different equipment and indicator tests that are covered in the ICID manual. And so for the virtual training, we did a combination of live demonstrations of facilitators at their own desks using, on camera, and also some pre-recorded videos. And you can see the 6 indicators and 1 source tracing methodology listed there that are covered in our field equipment demonstrations. Next in the curriculum is field exercises, and also like with the field equipment demonstration tables, the field exercises would be something that during the live trainings, the group would actually get up and ideally go out to a place where there's a catch basin or manhole or freshwater body, a creek, a wetland, whatever it might be, and practice some sampling techniques. But in the virtual Zoom world that we found ourselves in this past year, we resorted to some pre-recorded videos that we had to fill in that part of the curriculum. All right. So I want to turn now to the videos and some of the training content that we created in addition to updating the curriculum for the ICID manual. We added to an existing library of training videos during the 2013 publication of the manual. The team created 13 videos originally, and those include indicator tests, measurement methods, sampling techniques, and these were filmed during the live training workshops. So as a kind of opportunistic, candid live action type of filming approach. And for the project of updating the ICID manual, we created 6 new videos to add to that video library. But because we didn't do live trainings, we did more of a staged setting for those videos. The videos included additional indicator tests, an updated video of the overview of the ICID manual, and a video that covered the difference between a few types of visual indicators, including different types of sheen, different types of foam, and identifying iron bacteria deposits. All right, and what I wanted to do here was give you just a taste of some of the training videos and that are available for your use, including one that was an existing video from the original production of dye testing, and then another video of a new video that we created for using a turbidity tube or transparency tube to measure turbidity. So just bear with me here for a moment while I share my screen and bring up the video. All right, this is it. Turn on the video optimizing. Okay, can you guys see that screen okay? Not yet. Let's try it again. Here we go. Okay. Okay, we'll just pause it there. Gives you a taste of the video style, where it's, as I mentioned, it was during the live trainings, and kind of some live action shots showing the demonstration tables themselves. And now I'll share a clip from another video, and this is the turbidity tube video. So let's get that going here. Gotta hope you guys were able to see that all okay. Let's bring back our presentation. And that was intended to just give you a taste, as I say, of the video content and some of the training resources available. All right, get back to our PowerPoint. Okay, hoping you guys can all see that PowerPoint now, full screen. Okay, as I mentioned, the videos are part of a video library, and that library is managed by the Washington Stormwater Center. They have an IDDE YouTube channel, which I've got a screenshot of here. And it's a great resource. It has, as I say, the 13 plus 6, so 19 total videos that can be used for training resources, as well as just general education. And here's just a summary slide that shows the sources of where you can find the updated ICID manual and the training videos. The ICID manual is in a few places. It's housed on the Washington Stormwater Center's website, and also on the Ecology SAM webpage. There's a webpage for the Source ID program, including for this project. And also mentioned that we just completed a fact sheet that provides a 2-page summary of the overall project, and that can be found also on Ecology's SAM website. The training videos, as I mentioned, they're on the Washington Stormwater Center YouTube channel, and I believe that we'll be able to post a copy of this presentation on the conference website after this, and there are live links to these sources in the presentation that you can click and easily find this information. All right, that brings us to the end of our presentation. On behalf of myself and Jeanne Dorn and Rebecca Dugopolski, thanks for your time and attention this morning, and we welcome any questions.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
So we have time. We have a few minutes here for questions. We do have one question in the chat. Is there a plan to do any in-person trainings when COVID is over?
I'll just start that one, and Rebecca and Jeanne, feel free to chime in. I would say that we don't have any specific plans to do any in-person trainings at this time. It was a recommendation that we made to provide ongoing trainings, because that's just an ongoing need, and the permit requires that as well. At this time, I'm not aware of any scheduled trainings on IDDE, but that's something that we should definitely stay in touch with Ecology and see if they would support having some additional ones. Great, and I see that Rebecca posted the links to the training videos in the chat, and also the link to where you can find the ICID manual on the Washington Stormwater Center's website. And I will say there's some other supporting documents that you can find there, in addition, that may be of interest, including the original literature review and the original indicator thresholds memorandum.
Okay, sounds good. I've got a couple other questions here. How often do you recommend municipal staff get trained on ICID or IDDE field methodologies?
It's a good question, Nikki, and the permit doesn't specify how often that training should occur. So, I think it's up to the permittees to decide what's the appropriate frequency for their needs, for their program, for their staff. I would say certainly anytime that there's new staff that comes on board would be a worthwhile time, as well as at least once during each permit cycle. But if others have ideas on that, feel free to chime in.
That's typically what I recommend, once, a short refresher every year or two, but yeah, at least once during the permit cycle and as new staff come on board as well.
Yeah.
That sounds good. And one last question here. Is it possible to get a printed copy of the ICID manual from Ecology State Printing Office?
It's a good question. We've been asked that before, and none of us work for Ecology, so we can't say definitively. And I'm not entirely sure how that process works, but this is, it is included in Ecology's list of publications. So if that is something that is of interest to you to get a printed copy of the ICID manual, then I would encourage you to contact someone at Ecology, maybe start with Brandy Lubliner, the SAM coordinator, and take it from there.
Sounds good. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you very much to James, Rebecca, and Jeanne for addressing this important topic and these great resources. If you have additional questions, please feel free to contact the presenters through FeedLoop. Their contact information can be found in the program. Thanks again for your time this morning.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.